Good afternoon, everybody. Before I turn the mic over to President Fitzgerald, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the extraordinary measures of fighting the traffic uh, as we make our way around construction coming onto Wildwood into Jackson. I really do appreciate your time today. Little point of business today, I don't have the lights on, and if anybody's nervous about that or would prefer I turn the lights on and off, I'll do that. We got a lot of natural light, but we've got two back-to-back presentations tonight, and I kind of leave them off so that everybody can see the presentation better. Again, if anybody needs assistance, please let me know, but at this point, I'm gonna leave the lights off unless somebody starts waving their arms frantically. Ms. Fitzgerald, the meeting is all yours.
As always, I'm going to start with a couple of comments before I call it to order. There are two things. The first thing is maximum time for each speaker during debate or discussion. This is for board members. You may speak and debate twice on any motion on the same day. Each time may speak for up to 10 minutes. You cannot save time, however, and do a 5-minute once and then a 15-minute in a minute. You cannot speak until recognized by the chairperson, and whoever makes the motion may speak first in the discussion and then one more time. If someone's already spoken once, anyone who wishes to speak must be allowed to speak before a member speaks for a second and final time. And I'm going to encourage you guys, you get Leadership Magazine like I do? Yeah. Well, I have really been reading it carefully the last few times because it's been so pertinent to our particular board. I want you to read the article on board norms. When I went to the conference in Lansing, I felt about this big because they just beat us into our head. We have to have board norms, period. And then this article talks about a number of ways to do that. And I want you to really look at that because I am going to ask you to consider a time to meet to go over the whole concept. And we could have an MASB representative, or we could just all submit something we thought would be appropriate and go over it ourselves. We've done it both ways already, so whatever you think would work would be just fine. Okay, that's it. I'd like to call our meeting to order at this point and start with the, I'll make sure that when you come in, if you're going to speak, that you fill out a form as soon as you get here and give it to Michelle. Okay, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Harking back to my elementary school days at Trumbull School, I feel like I should sing My Country 'Tis of Thee after that every time. Okay, Michelle, will you please do the roll call?
Mrs. Brown, Mr. Dobies, Miss Acton,
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Here.
Miss Hunt, here, and Mrs. Fitzgerald.
Here. Okay, let's go from here to approval of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Moved. And Shalonda supported. Thank you. Any discussion about the agenda? No? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. At this point, we will start with continue with the superintendent's report.
All right, as you know, we have been doing equity work for some time now, and this year we were lucky enough to enter into an agreement with Aaron Johnson from Archetype Consulting. Dr. Johnson, I'm going to invite you to the microphone over here, and if you could introduce yourself to the crew. I know most of our staff have got a good handle on who you are. You could talk about the work you've been doing with Jackson Public Schools and really some of the directions that that work has led us to believe we should be moving into.
All right, am I good? All right. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to be here to speak with you this evening about the work that we've been engaging in this school year regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to first start by telling you a little bit about myself thought I was. There it is. Ah. So my name is Aaron Johnson. I received all of my education training at Wayne State University. I am a proud Detroiter. I was born and raised. I started my career in education in the Detroit Public Schools, and I received my all of my training in education from a school that is in Detroit. So that's a little bit about my educational background. Here's a little bit about my professional work background and my public school experience. Like I said, I started my career in the Detroit Public Schools. I then went on to be an assistant principal in Hamtramck Public Schools and then in Farmington Public Schools. So I'm assuming that the superintendent at the time liked what I was doing and liked some of the movement that I was making as an assistant principal. And she tapped me on the shoulder to be principal of Harrison High School, which unfortunately is now closed. I wanted to have more of an impact on the policy, the conversations and the decisions that were being made at the superintendent level and board level. And so I sought out a position in Grosse Pointe Public Schools as a director of secondary instruction. But when one of the superintendents came back, he asked me to come back to Farmington to be the assistant superintendent for instructional services. So that's why you see a little bit of movement there in my professional work experience. I have, since I started in the field of education, I have been dedicated, and I've dedicated my life and my work to the education of all children. I've always rooted for the underdog, so I have specifically made it my life's work and my life's passion to make sure that the children that were not being served by public schools would be served, and I would help schools be better for those students along with the other students that matriculate through schools. I have a little bit of higher ed experience because I thought part of my mission was to give back to teachers who were coming up in the field. So I took on, and I was talking to one of the staff members here who had taken on several positions at the higher ed level. So I took on a few positions to teach pre-service teachers, to teach teachers who were looking to get their master's in reading. And so you'll see there some of my experience at the higher ed level. So we embarked on a pretty ambitious task this year. And in my initial conversations with Superintendent Beal and the superintendent's cabinet, we sat down and we came up with a list of outcomes that we would like to see for the school year for this work and the people that should be involved in this work. Traditionally, you'll see that school districts, they'll train their teaching staff and they'll train their administrators in whatever topic that they would like to see move forward. I think it's ambitious and innovative in the fact that Superintendent Beal sought to have people that did not work as instructional people inside the classroom also take advantage of some of the activities that we went through, and I'll give a brief overview of that in a minute. But we had instructional staff, and these are teachers in the classroom, general education teachers, special education teachers, counselors, and anyone who had an instructional role in schools that took part of this professional learning. We also had engagement with support staff, so you'll see the list there of custodians, bus drivers, food service professionals, paraprofessionals, and secretaries and administrative assistants. And then last but not least, we've had engagements with administrators, principals, assistant principals, central office leadership, instructional technology, and support services leadership. And if I've left any group off of that, please forgive me. So we wanted to make sure that we maximize the number of people that we would be able to engage in this learning. And so we did 5 half days for each one of the cohort groups. So we had about 30 cohort groups in total. We explored the conversations around equity, bias, culture, race, racism, and we dug deep into many of those topics. And many of the participants remarked that they had not had open conversations such as this that we had about some of these topics. We participated in whole group discussions, so there were times where the group would be able to talk with one another. They would be able to talk with colleagues that they don't frequently have the opportunity to talk with. We'd have small group discussions, and we engaged in a number of activities that allowed them to understand some of these topics a little bit deeper. We developed learning intentions, driving question that was presented back to the group before we started each session, and we ended the groups with some personal goal setting. We collected data and feedback from staff members to understand what they would like to see moving forward in this work. What were some of the things they thought were challenges? What were some of the things that they liked, and how they would like to see this work continue? These are learning, or were our learning intentions, and I apologize for the colors. I'm trying to get a little fancy with PowerPoint, and it suggests certain things, and these are the colors that it suggested for this particular slide. But we felt like we needed to come up with and engage in this common language around bias, equity, culture, race, and racism. What do those things mean? We hear those topics thrown around all the time, and so we delved into the meanings of some of those things and what they meant to people personally. We developed an understanding of how to create, implement, and monitor environments that serve the needs of all students. We considered behaviors, and we really honed in on this, that we cannot change the behavior of anyone else. So we honed in on what the individual participants could do to understand their own behaviors and then change those behaviors to be better for students. We engaged in personal goal setting, which was our culminating activity. And then we developed ways, and this is one thing that we maybe didn't get into as much as we would have liked, to measure current state and progress through an equity lens. And so we did a little bit of data analysis and trying to understand what some of the gaps may look like in the Jackson Public Schools, but we didn't get to a point where we developed some systems and processes to better use that data. This was the definition for equity that we continuously went back to in each one of our sessions. I continued to remind the participants that they did not have to adopt this particular definition, that they could use their own definition or apply their own understanding to what equity is. But this is the one that we grounded ourselves in, and it's twofold, that we wanted to eliminate the predictability of success or failure based on any cultural or social factor. Unfortunately, in the United States, we can look at most school districts and predict how students are going to perform based on race, based on socioeconomics, based on gender, based on special education status, and so on and so forth. So the first leg of this equity the first leg of this equity definition means that we would like to eliminate that predictability. The second leg of this definition looks at disrupting, dismantling, or changing the policies, actions, and behaviors that produce inequitable outcomes in the first place. And so many times, unknowingly in organizations, there are policies, there's the unwritten culture, there are behaviors that people participate in that serve as barriers for student success. So we explored some of what those things might mean on an individual basis and on a systemic basis on how Jackson Public Schools can look at some of those things that might stand as barriers for student success. We looked at, I said driving question, but there are actually two questions here. We looked at these two questions at the bottom, but I'm gonna first take you through what I asked the participants to consider first before they sought to answer these questions, to take some self and personal responsibility. We can't make our schools and our school district better for students if we don't take accountability for our own actions. what biases that they might have. And this doesn't just mean racial biases. We as human beings, everybody on planet Earth, every human being on planet Earth has biases. So we explored what bias meant and how they can start to recognize some of the biases that they might have. They engaged in self-reflection about how some of those biases may have played out and the roles that they have and how they might impact students. And then we asked them to look at these questions and how they apply to the individuals within the system, the schools as an organization, and the system as a whole. And these are the questions. What biases do I have? And I've been meaning to change this question. How have they contributed to the inequities for students? How do I currently respond to the students in Jackson Public Schools? And so again, it's taking the look at the self first before looking at others. For the student assessment, I had the opportunity to meet some of Jackson's finest. The students are smart, they love school, they have great things to say, but they also have ideas for improvement. You know, the first thing that you ask a student about how to improve the school, they're going to say they want better lunches. You know, they're going to come up with some things like that. They're going to say they want more time off in the summer. They're going to say they want more snow days. Those are the surface answers. And they often ask me to ask Superintendent Beal to call more snow days. And I let them know it wasn't that simple. But they also gave some really poignant feedback about how to improve schools for them. They wanted people to know who they were as people, as human beings. They wanted their teachers and their administrators to understand how they learn and to incorporate some of the things they would like to learn. They wanted the adults to be more responsive to their needs. If they felt like they were being harmed, they wanted people to speak up on their behalf. And we had some really great conversations with students. They are so smart. They are looking for people to continue to have these types of conversations with them, to ask them what they need in order to succeed. So I asked them questions around these 5 focus areas. How are their identities affirmed in schools? How are the adults supportive and caring, supportive and collaborative in those learning environments? Do they have caring and supporting educators with whom they can discuss issues and problems with, regardless of whether or not it's academic or social or personal? How do their teachers respond to how they learn, and do they incorporate those things in their daily lessons? And whether the school environment as a whole did it meet their needs? This is an equitable learning environment. And you'll see in the full report, there are some student quotes, and there are some themes that arose, and there are some recommendations for addressing some of the things that they told me. Here are some of the highlights. Everything is not in here, so you'll only see a few of, I just captured what I believe to be the standout themes. These are for the adults. The adults said that there's a strong sense of community, that they didn't feel like, although the Jackson Public School community, the broader community, is a diverse community, they didn't feel like there was an animosity between people of different races and cultures and people that spoke different languages. That came out with when I asked the students a similar question, that came out in some of their answers as well. There's an interest in having more conversations about equity in the district. There's also a desire to have a broader conversation about equity that includes more than just a conversation about race. And so what you'll see in a lot of the recommendations, that they specifically mention race, but I want to highlight here that those conversations, those recommendations, the data that we collected did not specifically just focus on race, but because there was a theme of addressing and talking about race, I lifted that up into the recommendations. But when we talked about what equity is, we talked about equity with regard to special education status and ability, We talked about equity with regard to socioeconomic status, gender equity, equity in, equity between schools. There were some schools that felt like they weren't receiving some of the time and attention that other schools were receiving. And so we talked about all of those things. The adults also said that there needs to be more social and emotional support to help students with trauma. And I asked them, one of the culminating activities, to provide the superintendent and the Board of Education with some ideas about what can be done, making sure that those things were feasible. That was one of the criteria, that they couldn't ask for 3 teachers in every classroom. They couldn't ask for things that were not economically feasible, but that would seek to serve the needs of the students. So these are some of the highlights of the recommendations that you'll find in the report, along with others. Here's some of the recommendations from staff and students. Provide more opportunities for staff to highlight and enhance the thing that the district does well. What I found, excuse me one second. What I found was that there are a lot of things that the Jackson Public Schools does very well. And when you look at the recommendations, you might say, we're doing that, we've touched upon that, we've started that, we're in the middle of that. Many of the staff and students felt like there was not enough positive conversation about what you're already doing, and so they like to see more of that. One of the things that rose to the top was to create a culture to openly talk about race and racism, that this should not be a scary topic. The students are not scared to talk about it. The students were very forthcoming about some of the issues that they face, some solutions to some problems that they're seeing. And so they want the adults to be able to talk more about what happens to them in many cases on a daily basis. The district should take action to communicate the importance of creating equitable schools. So they like to see some conversation, a broad message about the direction that you are seeking to go in. This one is a student recommendation. They like to see a clear policy with built-in accountability for addressing some racially motivated, and I'm gonna add a spin to this, because even though these are their words with regard to race, but acts of harm that are perpetrated from student to student, in many cases from staff to student, they like to see a built-in accountability. I don't exactly know what that looks like, but this is one of the things they said they would like to see. And then individual schools in the district should assemble student groups in order to encourage value and amplify student voices. In all of the student conversations, and Mr. Patterson can attest to it because he was there for all of them, they all said, are you coming back? Are you going to ask us more questions? When do we have a chance to talk more about how we feel? And so they're looking for the opportunity to voice their opinions, to voice their concerns, or even to say great things, because I didn't ask all negative questions. I said, who's doing it well? Who is the person that you can go to when you're having an issue or a problem? Who's the person that teaches very well? Who's the person that makes sure that students get what they need? And so they like more opportunities to have their voices lifted up so that they can be heard and be a part of the process, be a part of the decision-making process and the learning process. I kind of ended it there. I tend to talk a lot, and so I didn't want to go too deep into it and to leave some spaces for questions in case you had any.
Where are we at currently? We've collected the data, we've had these conversations, the cohorts have convened on multiple occasions. What's our current status?
So what you see in the final report is what we've concluded for this school year. And so the next step would be to really understand where you would like to go in these next steps. So I gave some recommendations for next steps that you might do. I'm not sure if it's printed out here, but there is,
The path forward.
I'm sorry.
Are you talking about
the path forward? Yes,
Yes,
there's
yes,
a path.
yes,
Yes. And so it's a matter of what you would like to see the next steps be. I am more than willing to be on that, to continue to be on that journey with you, but if you choose to go in a different direction, I totally understand it as well.
On page 32, what does it mean at the very last sentence under recommendations? Create a list of, what would equity standards be? What would those be to be used in instruction, pedagogy, and discipline decisions?
So what I've seen in some school districts is they look at their strategic plan, and if they don't have an equity goal, an equity-centered goal, or strategies to go along with that, or standards to go along with that, then they might add that as an addendum, or they might even create a separate document that lists the type of environment that you want to create, your goals for equity, what some strategies might be to achieve those goals. And so that's, in a very general way, that's what it was trying to say.
And then I had another question too. So under the pie charts, under administrators, I was curious why you didn't put the statistics for a couple of the other.
Oh,
I'm just curious why that wasn't there.
yes, I didn't leave it out. It was just the way that the pie chart,
Oh,
because it was a smaller number,
okay.
it didn't actually register.
Okay, didn't let you.
And
okay.
so I probably should have made a little line with statistics, but I can certainly share that data
Okay.
with you.
And then I had another question also. What would be, wouldn't these, hang on just a minute. The racially motivated acts of harm, why won't those be documented? The children don't want to say something? Is that, or is it, are they afraid?
In some cases, they're afraid. In some cases, they felt like nothing would be done if they reported this, because many of them said that they had reported things in the past and they felt like there was no action that took place as a result of them reporting them. So in many cases, they would say, someone said this to me or someone did this to me, but I didn't say anything because I didn't believe anything was going to be done about that behavior.
And then the racial slurs, is that more student to student?
Yes, I don't recall any student saying a staff member used a racial slur.
Thank you.
But they did say that many times when they're reading a text, that a teacher would say a racial slur out loud if it's in the text, and that bothered some students.
You mean in a book?
Yes.
Okay. Which, like maybe Huckleberry Finn or something like that, or like a classic maybe?
Yeah, they didn't, I don't recall them mentioning
like
a
that,
particular book, but
Mhm.
if my memory is serving me correct, they mentioned that if it were in a book or something like that, that's when they would hear an adult say it.
Yeah, I like a lot of your ideas. I thought it was really good. I know that last board meeting, there were some children that didn't go on a field trip because they didn't have the finances for it. One of the teachers explained that. So I think some of the things, there's some good ideas here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think, Dr. Johnson, I think there's a couple things that just jumped off the page at me, and I think one of the pieces is how staff react and how staff felt comfortable reacting. I think it came off in a number of different places. So how staff react when they hear racial epithets thrown or used between student to student or reported by student to student. And I think some of how we respond, it's certainly something that our teachers are crying out for more help with.
Yes.
Our students are crying out for more help with. I think that was one of the, like if I had to, and there's a couple others, I think student voice was one of those that, in my opinion, kind of jumped off the page.
Yes.
You referred to it several times. And there was some staff voice in there that jumped off the page to me. And my cabinet and I will be looking deeper into this, and we'll be bringing kind of what we said we would do, bring forward our goals. This is what the work is guiding us to, and this is what we're going to attack. And so we recognize that this is just, if you will, describing an elephant in the dark. And so we're just touching part of the elephant.
Absolutely.
And we think we know exactly what the elephant looks like. And obviously the more we dig in, the better the picture we get of what this elephant looks
Absolutely.
like, rather than just, I'm holding on to the trunk or I'm holding on to the tail and now I know exactly what an elephant looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think those are pieces that, you know, just very quick, high-level takeaways, and obviously there's
Yes.
data behind that. But I think we heard some of those things from staff, from administrators, and from students. And so some of those common goals, some of those common targets, and they're hard conversations. It's not that it's hard to talk about race, but I think people need the tools in their toolbox
Absolutely.
and to be able to do that, and a comfort and acceptability to be able to do that, especially when confronting racism. And you know, that right there is part of the journey that we're on, I believe.
Absolutely, 100%. You lifted up a couple of things that I want to thank you for. This is a snapshot. We didn't interview every student in the district. We didn't interview every staff member in the district. We interviewed the people that were before us, and so this is a representative sample, if you will, of people in the district. That's the first thing, and then it was a common refrain, I think, that many times staff members themselves said that they didn't feel comfortable talking about race because they didn't want to say the wrong thing. Um, and many of them gave me positive feedback in that manner, in that I didn't point the finger at them, I didn't make them feel guilty, I didn't I didn't charge or indict them for anything, but that we were in a co-learning space, and that's what this was all about. This is about us learning about how to address some of the issues and how to enhance some of the things that you do well. The other thing, students are very cognizant of the how uncomfortable some of these conversations make the adults. They're cognizant of it. They would say things like, "I know it's awkward," or "So and so might feel awkward," when a conversation comes up. So we tend to avoid it, and that's why one of the recommendations was lifted up to talk more about it, not in the sense that you are um, trying to belabor a point, but that the more you talk about some of these issues, the more you can address them, the more you can come up with solutions to some of the problems.
All right. Again, my cabinet and I will be working through this report. We'll be making specific goals targeted from Dr. Johnson's work. We'll be sharing those goals with the board and how we intend to kind of work through that. There's lots of work to be done, and so no shortage of things to do. Does anybody else have any final questions for Dr. Johnson? I think I see
do.
a couple. Ms. Hunt, if I could.
One last question. So looking at your path forward statement, one of the sentences state, the process of engaging in this report also uncovered anecdotal data that there are some members of the community who do not want this work to persist. How are we addressing that? We have our teachers, administrative staff that are in leadership capacities, and if they're resistant or opposed to this work taking place within the community, how are we addressing that?
What I don't know. I'll give you the honest answer. I don't know, but what I can say is that one of the ways that, if I were to give a recommendation off the top of my head, um, is to continue to do the work that you believe in, because whatever work you do, there are going to be resistors. There are going to be people that push back. If you adopt a new math curriculum, which math is sort of like the universal language, right? If you adopt a new math curriculum, there are going to be people that don't want it. There are going to be people that believe that you should use this thing over this thing. But if it serves the needs of children, if it serves the needs of your community, if it serves the needs of our customers, if you will, I hate using that term, but if it serves the needs of the people who are supposed to be served by this organization, then you continue to do the work that you know will bring you the best results to do that.
I appreciate your response. While you were speaking, it came to mind, I was just thinking that for those teachers or administrators that are opposed to this work, is there any consideration for individual work to help them navigate? No, we can't force
Yes.
them to embrace this wholeheartedly, but I do think that some of the data may need to be captured with some of those staff that are opposed to this. They may be some of the root causes to some of those slurs and some of that unfair treatment that our students are referencing. So
Yes.
I would like to see that show up in our data
Yeah, absolutely.
to make sure that we're capturing.
And Mrs. Acton
Yes.
Dowell asked one of the questions about why some of the numbers were missing on some of the very low numbers. There's some, and those voices should be represented. When I transferred the charts, the numbers didn't just transfer. But there are some people that rated everything strongly disagree. And they were like, well, I asked, did I put up all of the outcomes for the year every session? And someone put strongly disagree, when we know that that was something that occurred every session. And so there were some that, for whatever reason, might have been pushing back. I didn't hear those individual voices, but I'm open to that feedback. If there's something that you believe should not continue as a result of doing this work, then your voice should be just as valuable as others. And you asked if there's opportunities for individual work. No, you cannot force anybody. But part of the work that I've been a part of in my past and that I continue to do is individual coaching. So folks that would like to continue this work on a more individual level can do so, because sometimes in a large group, it can be, you're asking people to be vulnerable in situations where they don't feel comfortable being vulnerable. And so this is, again, I'll reiterate this. This is not to point the finger at anyone. This is not to say you're a bad person. This is not to say our kids are bad. This work is meant to make the organization do what it actually says it does. And that's true for any school district.
Was there feedback for the strongly disagree? Was there any feedback that you solicited, why they had strong disagreement?
Yes, I gave an opportunity to give narrative statements. And in many cases, those narrative statements were not written. It'll say something like NA, or there was not a narrative to the feedback. But when you can hit those radio buttons and say strongly disagree, that's when people did that.
Now, will this audit be on our webpage for everyone to see, or no?
I'm
Is
not
it,
sure.
Is it up there or not? Is it-
Yeah, and we put the other audit on. This will
Okay.
fall under that category as
Okay.
well. So it'll be on our webpage. We haven't published it yet because
Okay.
again, we're still kind of digging into the data.
Okay.
So, but, obviously, we're working with Dr. Johnson. We're still developing our goals. We're still working with the board.
Okay.
This is, I
This-
kind of talked about it for months on end about, we want to bring this report to you. And I know that Jeremy, Mr. Patterson, been working to make sure that we could bring it. Obviously, we want to make sure we get this in as complete a form as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting the scores down for proficiency, because even on page 36, you said percentage-wise, students across the district do not have high levels of proficiency in reading, writing, and math, regardless of race. So, but I very thank you for showing those results. I appreciate that.
And I'll say this: I know it's hard to look at.
Yeah, it is hard.
It is. It's hard for any district to look at how their students are performing if it doesn't tell the best story. However, we can't improve upon it until we know what it is that we're trying to improve upon. And so, one of the activities that we did with the administrators was that we took a very hard look at this data and asked some questions around why they believe this was the case. And so, and again, I only highlighted some of it. I didn't include, it's already 37 pages. If I would have included all of that in there, the report would have even been much longer than it was.
Mr. Dobies?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for this report. Seeing a lot of different recommendations to implement in your professional opinion, what you've seen in other school districts. How do they drive those recommendations and ensure the sustainability of some of these initiatives by in terms of structure?
It's a great question. They choose one or two things and just do those things very well. I have a lot of recommendations here, and it's very difficult. We know even, I'll speak for myself. In my personal life, if I have 10 goals, I'll probably only get 1 or 2 done, right? And so they choose the things that are, for lack of a better word, the low-hanging fruit, the things that they know they can hit it out of the ballpark, and they do those things very well. I've worked with one district who said that they're going to make sure that they have every student reading at grade level. That was their only goal for the district, which is an extremely daunting task, which I don't believe they ever achieved. However, the efforts that they made to get the students to get there were tremendous. They had tremendous gains for students. And so I think if you focus on a couple of key things and just do those things very well, my job in my role as a principal, I had a couple of things that I wanted to do on a daily basis. I wanted to impact student achievement. I wanted to impact culture, and I wanted to make sure that the community was involved in some way, shape, or form in every single day. And so I had to, like, if it was 2 o'clock and school gets out at 2:30 and I didn't get everything that I wanted to get done for that day, I had to be very intentional about making sure that I accomplished that. And so I think with a few very specific goals, you'll be able to accomplish those.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I appreciate it, your time and effort, and I know that you and I will continue to talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time here.
Dr. Johnson has absolutely been a true professional to work with. It's nice to have somebody who's got a wide-ranging school experience, understands the work and the conversation that takes place with teachers, administrators, and at the same time works with students and has a professional background working with students. So what an awesome opportunity we had, and we were very thankful, and I'm excited about the report. As ugly as some of it may be, the reality is I think it shows us some common things that should be a path forward. With that being said, that concludes the superintendent's report for the month of July. And so I will pass it back to you, Ms. Fitzgerald.
Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval. Second.
Okay, who is first? Okay, Libby, and then Derek. Okay. Call for support.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, motion passes. Okay, we're now into the part, citizens requesting to address the board. We only have 2 tonight, so I will just have you come up. William Hastings and Nancy Smith.
Well, I wasn't aware Dr. Johnson was going to be here tonight. It's kind of unfortunate when we had the last DEI trainer, advocate, lobbyist, whatever you'd like to call them, Dr. Marks, there was an open community event where everyone could come and have a dialogue and ask specific questions. We didn't have an opportunity this time in that regard. So just a couple observations from the presentation. One of the first thing I noticed is, while there was a statement along the lines that student identities must be affirmed, there's no mention of student and parental responsibilities in achieving academic success and success in school. And I've noticed this going back to the original DEI, what's it called, survey from 2017. And I read through that, and it explicitly denied and castigates the notion that students and parents have a specific role to play in their academic success. The notion is it's something academic competencies and successes in school is something that's either given by students and administrators to student, or it's withheld because they're ignorant and selfish and racist and wicked. And I don't think that accords with the real world. So another thing I'd ask Dr. Johnson is, since so much of DI involves trying to put all kinds of different data points under a racial lens, is there information, have you reviewed chronic tardyism at JPS by race? Have you reviewed and published information about chronic absenteeism by race? Because I think it came out in the last couple months that approximately half the students here miss more than a month of school every year. You can't learn a darn thing if you're on the streets or at home and not in a classroom. And I'd also ask, is information, has it been reviewed or can it be published or shared about the attendance at parent-teacher conferences by race? And you can also put these under the dual lens of race and income. And I also thought, and these are just, I guess, some off-the-cuff remarks, I thought it was very interesting when Dr. Johnson, when he said, teachers said, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? And I think that really spoke to me that a lot of students crave attention from strong, attentive, responsible, dignified males. And that is an absence that really can't be filled by any of us. It's way bigger than that. It's way bigger than that. Yeah. So as I said, and I was going to say, so this is the opposite. There's other people engage in very different forms of preparing their kids for life than DEI. So I was doing some research today about South Korea. In Korea, 80% of school kids in South Korea, they go what are called cram schools, which is after-school academic boot camps, sometimes till 11 at night. Parents pay between $1,500 and $3,000 a month. That's like house payment and food and basic expenses to make sure their kids have world-class, hard, marketable skills in math, reading, and science. And I think these are the doctors, entrepreneurs, programmers, and CEOs of tomorrow. And I think DEI is really, it's completely missing the mark in the priorities of schools, which have to be to imbue basic skills. And I'm glad that at least some mention is made in the report, which I haven't seen, but I'll be looking for, about the basic proficiencies. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hastings. Nancy?
Good evening.
Evening.
My name's Nancy Smith, and I'm proud to be a parent of a former student in JPS, School of Choice student. She graduated in 2020. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here tonight as a staff person for State Senator Sue Schenck, and she's asking me to bring a couple of updates and reports to you. For one thing, she's very proud of the work she did toward the recent new Michigan budget that has just passed. Part of the process in the budget was prioritizing input of residents and community members and organizations like JPS across the district and across the state, and then using those perspectives to create the budget. So just for K-12 education, I'll report that the new budget includes a 5% increase in education funding overall, increase in funding for at-risk districts, universal school meals, and fully funded special education programs. So Senator Schenck is just really happy to be bringing resources to students and to school districts. And I just heard from the office that an email will be going out to all the districts across the county within a couple days, so you'll probably get some details on that. In addition, in the summertime, the legislators are not in session formally doing the lawmaking. They do other things, and one of the things is called, I guess you'd call it constituent outreach. And so we have been walking through neighborhoods these last 2 weeks in a lot in Jackson, and just trying to engage with residents and ask what issues they care about and what they want Lansing to be working on when they come back into session. So you might see us out on the streets, say hi and talk to us. If you're not home, we're leaving cards on your door. And also I want to tell you that any of you are welcome to reach out, including residents and citizens are welcome to reach out to the office at any time. The senator works for you. If you go to senatorschink.com, that's a very easy way to, I think there's a contact me button which takes you right to her email. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment for tonight. Okay. Now we're on to discussion items. The special ed curriculum for discussion, 23-24-6. And who's going to, will you do that? Okay,
I'll
excellent.
introduce it. So much like we adopted curriculum in the spring, we are back with some more curriculum. This specific curriculum relates to special education, and so we have invited. We have invited a group that's been working on this and to help us make this recommendation. Our goal is to bring this back as an action item for purchase at the August meeting. But if I could, will you, Ms. Armstrong, if you don't know, Precious Armstrong is our special education coordinator, and if you will kind of introduce your crew, let us know who's here so we can acknowledge them and appreciate their time tonight. Go from there.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I'm
Good
Dr.
evening.
Precious Armstrong, and it is my pleasure to support Jackson Public Schools with our special education programming. And with us this evening, we have Lee Brar, and she is from McGraw-Hill. She's been absolutely amazing. And then we have some wonderful staff who, they were in the trenches making this decision for the recommendation that you have before you. And so we have Danielle Newbaum, who is a fantastic EI teacher. So that's a teacher for students with emotional impairment, and she does some of everything on top of that. And then we have Kathy Wilson, who was also an amazing teacher for students with emotional impairment. And then we have Marley Neal, who is another one of our teachers who services both Parkside and 4th Street Learning Center. And so these are some of the teachers and staff that were a part of this decision. And so it is just a delight to be able to come before y'all this evening. So let's talk about what we need. So the reason why we come before you this evening is because we recognize that there was a deficit. There was a deficit in how we were supporting the needs of our students, and that we know that in order for our students to grow, for them to have comprehensive increase in their skill sets for that reading, that writing, and that math, we needed to make sure that we have the materials for them. And so to undertake that, listening to staff, listening to them saying, I don't have it. I'm going to teacher pay teachers. I don't have it. Can you order this? Can you order that? In isolation, we recognize that that deficit needed to be filled. And so in order to undertake that, we went about the process of looking at what materials were available. And for this particular piece, we asked all the teachers in secondary land, because we're starting off with secondary, we asked, okay, who would like to be a part of this process, recognizing that those individuals that are boots on the ground are who need to be a part of that conversation. And so we solicited teachers to say who wants to join in. And so we were really fortunate to have a number of teachers join. And so with that, we then went about the process of reviewing multiple vendors. We had 4 vendors come and present and work with the teachers to decide what they wanted to try out. And hands down, McGraw-Hill stood out as they were excited and said, I want this. I want to see more about this. I want to try this out. And so with that, that's how we came to McGraw-Hill. It was teachers' voices being lifted to see what makes sense and what the research supported. And that's how we came to that recommendation to move forward with that. And so why this recommendation to purchase materials? Well, when you look at the continuum of what we had, again, we didn't have anything. We have stuff that teachers have pulled together, and it's probably been a good 20 years or more since we have purchased things specifically targeted special ed. We have done an amazing job. We have phenomenal teachers and support staff that support our babies day in and day out. However, being intentional about what materials we have that have a very clear scope and sequence, we just have not had of recent. And so they have been making things amazing, really on a string, on a shoestring. And so recognizing, again, going back to that deficit, we said we've got to do something that makes good sense. And so what we look to do is identify those materials that have a clear scope and sequence, making sure that we are supporting teachers for delivering specially designed instruction, and making sure that these materials are going to best align with increasing our overall achievement. We know that one of the pieces that was clearly identified with that TSI designation was that we have a gap where our babies are not as proficient as we would like them to be, and that gap lays mostly with our students with IEPs. And so how are we remediating that? How are we filling that gap? And so this was a very intentional step to fill that gap so that we can see increases in our graduation rates, increases in our post-secondary outcomes, increases in how our babies are able to read, write, and do the math. This is going to allow us to do that. And so what are we asking for? We're looking for these materials specific to corrective reading, decoding, and comprehension. We're looking at connecting math concepts. We're looking at the expressive writing 1 and 2, as well as essentials for writing. Why these specific things? Because these are the areas for which our students need that remediation. When we look at how a student qualifies for an IEP, we have 13 eligibility areas, but they target specifically how that student is able to, or having challenges with regard to how they advance through the curriculum. When we are targeted with our materials, we can fill in so that when they're going into that gen ed class and doing their history, doing their science, doing the general ed math, they're able to actually achieve what they're saying their more typical peers are, because we filled in those gaps. And so that's what we look to corrective reading. That's what we look to connecting math concepts. That's what we look to the expressive and essential writing, because we know that the research says that that targeted direct instruction is one of the most effective evidence-based solutions for us to make sure that teachers have laid before them, this is what I need to teach. I can assess where my students start off at, and from that assessment say, let me then make sure that I am meeting those students where they are and scaffolding them to greatness. And so that is why we have selected this, because when we look at the research, when you consider the packet, there are links within it that talk about direct instruction and how there is numerous research to back how this works. Our students grow when they have this. And so that is why we bring that before you today. Brought Lee in because Lee can also ask more questions, because this is something we piloted. So I can't pretend to say that I am the expert on it. What I can say is that I am an expert of sorts. I'm an expert on what students need that have IEPs. And this is something I think we need here at JPS, because we do amazing things already, but I want to take us to the next level. And this is something that our teachers have said, this is what we need to make that happen. So then what are the benefits of this? So we talked a little bit and said with the corrective reading, with all of these different curricular tools, we know that they're taking direct instruction, they're giving you the materials and saying, now you can reach higher heights. And with that, what does it give us? We're looking at increased student engagement. We are looking at that we are not kind of putting things together as a puzzle piece for math. We're saying here is how you lay it out for our students so they can truly grow. We are saying that teachers don't have to beg, borrow, and steal to have the materials. They'll all have the materials they need in front of them. We're saying that with this, the teachers have taken the time to try out all the materials and are excited about it, but I'm gonna let them tell you about it themselves. And then what we're saying is that in reaching and meeting our students where they are, we are looking at equitable access to achievement. That is one of the things that we have to strive to do, knowing that our students come to us not raw material. They come to us as amazing creatures capable of phenomenal things, but we have to be able to recognize what they bring and then meet them and grow together. This provides that opportunity. It is also compatible with Google Classroom that we already use extensively throughout the district. We have built into this recommendation professional development, knowing that I can't expect you to fly if I never give you wings. And so we will definitely make sure that there's professional development that would happen first as that initial onboarding, and then continuing to meet with our teachers, because everybody has to have the tools. And I don't know about you, there are times that you'll learn something and then you forget. You're like, I think I knew what I thought I knew, but maybe I don't really know it. And so in recognizing that this is a learning, growing together, we'll continue to touch base to make sure that our staff have what they need, because when your staff are supported, they can make sure our babies do all the things that are possible for them. And then making sure that there's a clearly defined continuum. This is a first step. The idea with this is to make the recommendation for secondary, and then to go back and have that conversation with our elementary personnel with regard to what they need within the special ed classrooms that we have in elementary. But again, knowing that there is a deficit because we didn't have anything. It's been years, probably more than 20. And that need has to be filled, and this is a piece that can help us get there. So with that, first I want to see, do y'all have any questions for Lee? Because y'all have wonderful information. Yes, ma'am.
I do. Does this series directly align with what we're talking about here, with what we have for the classrooms that are inclusive? They're not all special ed or all general ed. It's real important to me as we adopt this new curriculum, that our students who sometimes go in and out of SE classrooms, that they're learning the same things along the way as the non-inclusive.
I'm glad you asked that, because what this is targeting is our students that are receiving resource support, specifically those direct instruction classes. And so they're still getting their general ed instruction within the general ed setting. However, it's going over their heads. And so we've got to make sure we shore up those gaps so that it doesn't go over their heads. So the idea is that these direct studies classes would be utilizing this curriculum so that when they go into the gen ed class, whether it is a co-taught, whether it is a full inclusion class, whether it is a direct taught class, that they're going to be able to go in and have a greater foothold on what they need to learn. And so it is a marriage of, how do I make sure that my gen ed accommodations match up where my skill sets are, so that we bridge that gap most effectively?
Okay, so you feel confident that students who have an IEP or have a 504 or whatever, who are in gen ed classrooms or inclusion classrooms, as we say, will be able to keep up based on what they're being taught in this curriculum prior to that?
I never want to say keep up, because then I'm setting this mark that it's different for every child.
Absolutely.
What I'd rather say is that the growth that we'll see will be significant to be able to move towards closing that gap.
Okay, and the
And so-
curriculum, if it didn't match, it would make the gap wider.
Absolutely.
So I
If
wanted to
we're-
make sure that we're tightening the gap.
Absolutely, because what we're finding is our students that have IEPs that are not in our self-contained, and it's important to separate that population because we have a curriculum for them. We have a continuum of service for our self-contained classrooms. But where we're falling short is our babies that are in our resource classrooms. And so it's making sure that we are giving them those skills. If I'm only ever getting pieces and parts of the puzzle, I can never create the full picture. And so this curriculum will fill in the gaps so that those babies will reach those higher heights, because what we're seeing is we've got babies that are in middle school through high school that have second grade skill sets.
Exactly.
And that means that the readability of our typical text within a gen ed setting is 5th grade or higher. They're not reaching that. And so the accommodations are great because we have teachers doing phenomenal things with accommodations. However, you're not always going to be in a high school classroom. You're not always going to be in a middle school classroom. So you need to have the skills so that when no one's around to help give you the accommodations, you have the skills to thrive. This provides that opportunity.
That's wonderful. I teach writing at JC, and I've been doing that since I retired as principal from here. And I see schools sending students to us without the alignment in pretty much an expected curriculum at the college level. And I think that starts at what you're saying right now. It starts much, much younger than 12th grade.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just also add, I think one of the most important comments that was said that you hit on is the fact that these materials are designed to accelerate students. And so starting with middle school and high school, I was a high school special ed teacher. When you have students that come to you and they're 16, but they're reading second, there's a sense of, well, what are you going to do that's different than everybody else? Because they're aware how low some of these students are reading. What's so exciting is that the goals of the program is to accelerate that so that they're more able to see catch-up growth where they have not before. And so they can access more of the core. The whole point of these materials is that the students feel they're making gains, and so therefore they're more capable of accessing whatever it is they want to access.
So you can't incorporate this into general ed though, because the students are real behind. I mean, I'm looking at some results right here. Is it, or is there something else in place for gen ed? Because I'm really impressed. I'm reading right here. It's really amazing. Results with direct instructions, corrective reading in middle school and high school. I was just kind of wondering.
So what we know is in a perfect world, we would have co-teaching for every single subject, and we would be able to break out into small groups, and we would be able to remediate because we know the research says, hey, we want to have them in that gen ed setting as much as possible. However, this isn't a perfect world. And so where we're at is we have babies that are getting to middle school and high school, and regardless of all the amazing things that teachers are doing, they're still not there. And so now you're saying this 16-year-old, this 15-year-old, this 18-year-old, I'm in class with my typical peers, and now you want me to learn how to read in front of them. And now I'm not going to check in. I am disengaged because I'm very aware of this. I want to read, but it takes a whole lot more bravery than most of us would have to be able to make that leap to be able to do that. And at the same time, putting that burden on that gen ed teacher to say, you're not only going to teach to that high level, but you're also going to catch up with someone who is 6 grades behind and be able to adapt that. The differentiation gap is tremendous. And so what we're saying is that in a perfect world, yes, but living in the reality of what we can do and what we know is possible, this gives us that tool to make sure that when they are in that classroom, it is not as bad, that they're going to grow and they're going to feel better about making those chances, making those leaps, because we have built up what they have with regard to their skill sets.
Thank you.
So what I'd love to do, because they're the ones boots on the ground, I want to have the teachers come up and speak to just their experience with this. All right, ladies. Sorry. Hi, everybody.
You want to go first? No. Okay, I'll go first. See, you wanted to go first. So one of the things that we really liked, we looked at all of these programs and we came in and we're looking at it. And to go back a little bit, I think when Dr. Armstrong started working with Jackson Public, I was one of the first ones to go like, can you get me some type of like reading intervention curriculum? I need a reading intervention curriculum. I need something, and I need something that doesn't look elementary school. I need something that my students will buy into. And when we went through the trainings and looking at all the other programs, everyone had this sense of being too childish, being too elementary. And I'm just thinking of some of my high school students who would be like, nope, not gonna look at it. What the heck are you doing, Newbound? Would be the conversation. They wouldn't say it that nicely. But it would be something along those lines of like, well, I'm not doing this. When we came across corrective reading in McGraw-Hill and all of their intervention, this system, what we noticed is, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we're looking for. This is presented in a way that is for these secondary students, right? But the skills are at that lower elementary level. One of those things with students who struggle to read or have struggles in academics, they know it. And the biggest issue they have is trying to, as special ed teachers that we have sometimes, is trying to save their dignity as far as trying to help them without, as long as saving face with their friends, right? Because some are very embarrassed by it. Every once in a while you get a kid who's really proud of it and will tell you all about it, but they're few and far between. We really felt like this program was to teach the students skills versus the curriculum. And it also gives us a diagnostic test. So we can have 10 kids in front of us and they're gonna be at 10 different levels and we really have no idea where to start, right? So this at least gives us some type of assessment that we can give them that kind of helps us group and say, you know, these 3 kids should probably start at this level to start moving forward. And then these 2 should go in this level. And it makes it a little easier as a teacher to be able to go, okay, now I know what I'm gonna do today and get that lesson plan and get through that instruction.
And on Danielle's point, when I came over to middle school from elementary, I was like, okay, what am I gonna teach? Because I really had no clue. I'm teaching a group of kids who have emotional impairments. And even though I've done that at the elementary level, when I went to middle school, I was like, I have to match up to what they're learning at the middle school level. What am I gonna teach? I had no idea. What did I do? I pulled from teacher-paid teachers. That's all I taught all day long. Because in my particular classroom, I have kids who are at a pre-K reading level, who are still working on learning their letters and sounds, to kids who are actually reading at an 8th grade reading level in the middle school classroom. So it was really hard to find something that I could hit all these skills that are needed for these kids. And that also follows along with their math skills. I had kids who could knock out division and fractions and everything. And then I had kids who literally could not know what 2 + 0 was without having to look at their fingers. 2. Oh, I don't add any. 2. So finding those things to work on with these students and knowing where to go with them, these assessments help us with that and help us get those kids to a level where they could go into another classroom. And doing it with the study skills students, where they're gonna be able to work on those skills to help when they are in those general education classes, is going to be a huge help to the kiddos.
I'm gonna pick it up. Okay, so I'm like Kathy, and last year was my first year at JPS, but I was teaching elementary in Columbia, and I still like didn't have anything there. I was always pulling from my mom's class. She teaches at Onsted, and I moved here, and I came, and I was like, okay, 4th Street. I've seen my dad teach there. I can do it, right? So I was all prepared for behavior. And then I got there, and that was like the easiest part. I'm like, okay, now what am I teaching? So I was always pulling, and to go off what she said about the childish things, I was pulling things that I had in the past that was like all about stories about animals in the woods making friends with other talking animals. And my kids are like, no, it's not happening. And I'm like, I know. But what I like about this is when you look at sample lessons, or even you just go through all the lessons, it's not the talking animals, it's like the animal's habitat and what's in the forest. And it's more read to learn while learning to read, which I really appreciated. And in the past, I've taught summer school back at Onset in Columbia, whatever. And they've used a program like this, and I used it in my student teaching as well. And the one thing I really like about it is it grows confidence so much. When you do in a lesson and there's group reading, at the beginning, they're all reading like this, and no one wants to read out loud. But by the end, everyone's reading loud. They want to be the loudest person in the room. They want everyone to know that they're going to be the smartest reader and they're going to get everything right. And that is like eye-opening. And then another thing that I really like is you can really see your own growth. So I'm all about tracking student progress and students tracking their own progress. And they'll see, like, I couldn't even make a plural word. Like, I couldn't even read plural words now. Now I can see a word and change it to plural. Or I couldn't even tell you what one sentence summary of what I read.
But now I can summarize and tell you all the characters, where the setting was. Like, they see their own growth and they can go back and be like, I got this. Like, I'm doing a lot better, especially at middle school where everything you want is like fast, fast, fast. And so when you can see those easy, or not easy, but you can see your growth quicker, like she said about accelerating, it really is like phenomenal what you can, and then the more buy-in you get. So, yeah, that was my verb.
Question?
How long was this program piloted?
So it wasn't really piloted as much as it was, we were looking through and trying to figure out what we wanted to do and what we wanted. We did get through and we did get like sandbox access to it, right? So we could play around with it. And I want to say for the last 2 months of school,
Yeah, almost 3 months.
I think there was probably eight to 10 teachers that were part of this group. And we all kind of went through and we had about 2 or 3 meetings where you would, figure out which ones you want, get the sandbox access, and then go and use it with a couple of students and see how they liked it and everything like that. So,
And like I used it with a couple of my lowest students, and they were even buying into it. And so that's what I really appreciated, because my one who can't do any math, that's one that I tested it with, and he was actually trying. And this is a kid who, as soon as he sees work, he shuts down and starts acting up, and usually is working his way out to get out of the classroom because he knows that he doesn't know how to do it. So that is one of the things that I was impressed by with it.
Another thing, I piloted it at 4th Street, and one of the things that we deal with a lot is attendance there, shocking. But I had a student that would come maybe once or twice a week, and even just coming once or twice a week, we still made progress. And we have to go back a lot more, but and the progress was smaller, obviously. You're only there for 5 days out of a month. But even being there 5 days out of a month, we made progress. So I thought that was really something that I wanted to highlight. Sorry.
When the children or the students are making progress, is there a two-way dialogue that the teachers have with the student? Is that another opportunity where you're building their confidence and encouraging them to stay invested and committed to the work?
Yes. Yep. I also have, I'm not going to reach over there. Just talk loudly. I can do that. I also have, I put graph charts, because one thing that we do is timed reading, and that's part of the fluency. And the pie charts are in their binders, and then they can go and they can show everyone look, I was here and now I'm here. And so they like to do that too. So that's also a show off kind of thing we use.
and I will say this, in high school, what happens is a lot of the shenanigans that happen in elementary school, they tend to calm down when you get to the 9th through 12th grade. And the real world starts coming at them quick and in a hurry, and real life experiences start coming at them. I can share that I had a student who went for a job interview, got the job, which was wonderful. We celebrated that with him. And then a couple days later, he said, well, I quit. I said, why'd you quit? You just started. What's going on? Well, talked to his parent, and come to find out what happened was that he had to read a test or take a test for Safe Serve or something like that, and he couldn't read it. And he was extremely embarrassed at the fact that he couldn't read it, and normally he would call his mom, and he couldn't get and he didn't want to ask for accommodations or for help with it. And so he just quit and ran away. So that was kind of a big thing that really kind of helped push as well. Not just so much that we're going to get them through high school but we're also going to give them some survival skills to be able to function in the real world. And these are real life functional skills that are needed.
Thank you for the presentation and for your feedback tonight. I just have to say, oh my God, the work that our teachers have to do every day and the challenges that they have to face with materials that you're borrowing from wherever you can to deal with some of the highest need students is really incredible. And thank you for that. It's great to be updating with new materials, new curriculum for some of our most vulnerable populations after 20 years. And hopefully we don't wait another 20 and continually do this and provide, our teachers with the support and resources that they need. So excited to vote for this when it comes back at our next meeting.
Thank you.
So some of the things you see, just to wrap it up, and they're fantastic. I so appreciate them. It's just kind of showing you further. This captures what they were discussing with regard to just having those tools available, the easy onboarding piece with it, how it's developmentally appropriate. So we just highlighted that with this feedback slide. But they've talked about it, and they're way better than any slide. Then it breaks down our proposal, which is we're looking at materials for all of our teachers. So all of our 612 teachers would have these materials for them. They'd have a classroom set for everything, recognizing that our resource classrooms tap out at 14 students. But we have 15 per student, per teacher, to make sure that we're gonna have people rotate. The idea is where they're gonna rotate up, in that students should not stay in the same spot. They should be growing, and as they're growing, these materials are gonna rotate. But we don't want teachers to be scrambling to go find the materials. We need them to have the materials on hand. We don't wanna lose that momentum. We need to continue to push that envelope for student growth. And so these are the pieces that just outline the proposal so that you know what this pretty large amount, but is well worth it, that we're asking for. And this is coming out of the ESSER 3 funds. And so that's not that general budget, nor is it part of that pass-through that will go on the 4096. So that is a wonderful thing. And kudos to Assistant Superintendent Leon for making sure that we have that piece built in. And those are the pieces that we're looking at as next steps. We would hope for your approval and then move forward with our purchase agreement and making sure that we get this all onboarded and then begin this process in the fall with the elementary group, recognizing that we need to make sure we have a K-12 continuum, not just a secondary continuum. And so that will be that next step. And so those are the pieces that we come to you today with.
I do have one question. I won't say if, when it's approved next month. What's the timeline to get the materials?
The turnaround is really quick.
10 to 14 days.
Mm-hmm.
They're out of Ohio, so they don't have far to travel.
A follow-up question to that: when would the onboarding and the professional development be scheduled once we get those, the curriculum?
Next day.
The next day.
The next day.
Awesome. Thank you. Is that a full day? Are we anticipating a half day, full day?
Full day.
Full day. Thank you.
Mr. Dobies?
For the elementary curriculum, what's the turnaround time on pilot to purchase?
That's a different scenario because the dynamics of elementary buildings are a little different. And so I anticipate that we will start this and have it wrapped up to have a proposal for you all by October. We want to get this onboarded with y'all approval. We want to get this taken care of sooner than later because our children are worth it. We need to make sure that we don't see more time go by without having what they need.
That answered my question. I was going to ask about the continuum between the K-5 and the 612. When they get between 5 and 6, will it still mesh? Good, I was glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I did notice the 5 of you, 2 of you didn't get the polka dot memo. I think that's so cute.
All right, so just to get this on the record, next month, we will be bringing this back for action. The recommendation will be to purchase the 612 special education curriculum piloted this past year for the amount of $155,635 that will be paid for through our ESSER 3 grant. I know that that's already included in the application, so once it's approved, we'll be able to move forward with that purchase.
Okay.
And again, what we just heard is we'll get it in relatively short order.
That's
so that will be awesome.
Really short order. Okay, we move on here to action items and the elementary handbook common pages. Jeff and Jeremy will present for us.
Move approval of the common pages for the elementary handbooks and secondary handbooks.
So just so I heard it, and I'm good, I just want to make sure that I get the motion correct. Is this to approve common pages? They're the same.
Yeah.
It's just so everybody in the
Yeah.
audience understands elementary and secondary common pages are the same. Your motion was to approve both elementary and common at the same time, which is fine with us. I just need a second.
A second?
Support.
Support. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion passes. Thank you. Now we go on to secondary handbooks, common. No? Oh, you did both of them? Well, aren't you snazzy? A second time. There we go. All we have now are board comments. Anybody have a comment?
Enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you for
Thank you.
coming. This has been very interesting. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed curriculum myself, and I am just thrilled that we're putting money where our mouth needs to be. Excellent. I really appreciate your time. And I really appreciate you people coming and sitting through things that I'm sure the most exciting thing you've done in your whole life is listen to common pages and handbooks and elementary curriculum. But thank you very much. Anybody else comment from board?
I
Nope.
really enjoyed the presentations. And
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. and
Absolutely.
being on those committees and presenting tonight.
Excellent. Okay, let's go on to our calendar. We have 2 items. Our regular board meeting is August 15th, again in the Media Center at 5:30. And there's an all-staff welcome back, the 22nd at Jackson High at 11:30. And that's all staff, district all staff. So that's always fun. Okay, at this point, I will.
Support.
Who's going to support? Who supported? Marilyn did. Okay, discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night.
Enjoy the rest of your July, everyone.